Hi folks, Rod Genders here again. Thought you might like to know a little bit about the beginnings of my firm, Genders and Partners. The firm began in 1848 when the Sheriff of South Australia, Samuel Smart, resigned from that post after the attempted murder, his own attempted murder by a convict named McGee. Now McGee took a pot shot at him, missed, but he was arrested and convicted of the charge of attempted murder. He was sentenced to hang, and as it was the first public execution in South Australia, they didn't know how to do it. They had to scout around and try to find a suitable site to hold the public hanging. They ended up in what is now the car park of the Adelaide Oval. They found a gum tree with a sufficiently strong limb on it to hold the poor old chap to be hanged. And what happened was a whole procession went down King William Street in Adelaide. The troopers were guarding the condemned man who was sitting on his own coffin, waving at the crowd as he went. The executioner was there with the condemned man, the executioner wearing the traditional black hood so he couldn't be recognised. They got down to the site, and what was supposed to happen was that the condemned man was strung up, he was on his horse, and he was supposed to have the horse whipped out from under him by the executioner, and he would come off the back of the horse and snap his neck with a nice clean death. Unfortunately, this being the first public execution in South Australia, it all went horribly wrong. The executioner was nervous, and he didn't whip the horse, he just sort of slapped it, and the horse moseyed off quietly, and the condemned man just slid off the back of the horse, and then was there dangling, kicking, doing horrible things as he slowly choked. People in the crowd were screaming, women fainted, there were calls for the troopers to shoot the poor man out of his misery. Well, in all this panic, the executioner panicked, grabbed the horse and rode off into the distance. So the only one who kept his head was the then sheriff, who was the victim in all this, Samuel Smart. He ordered the troopers to go off and recapture the executioner and brought him back at gunpoint. And the executioner had to finish the job, but he didn't know what to do, so all he could think of doing was pulling on the legs of the poor condemned man to finish him off. Anyway, not surprisingly, Samuel Smart, the sheriff, didn't think too highly of all of this and lost his taste for that particular job, so he set up law practice on his own after that, after resigning from the government position, and thus my law firm was born. It wasn't called Genders and Partners in those days. Genders didn't actually figure in the firm until early in the 1900s, when my grandfather Eustace joined the firm. Before that, it was Smart by himself. Then it was Smart and Wilson. Wilson was a lawyer who joined, ATK Wilson. And then eventually Smart died and it became Wilson and Genders. And then for most of the 1900s it was Genders, Wilson and Partners. And there have been quite a few notable legal dignitaries who have gone through the firm, including several Supreme Court justices. An interesting little side note to that story that I've just told you was that the Supreme Court Chief Justice at the time of that first public execution was Henry Jickling, a true eccentric. And he was so unnerved by the spectacle of that botched public execution that he contrived to interfere in the next 17 capital cases that appeared in the Supreme Court of South Australia, and managed to ensure that there was a not guilty verdict in every single one of them, because he couldn't bring himself to pronounce sentence of death against any other accused. Not surprisingly, the powers that be thought that wasn't the way to go, and he was relieved of his command and sent back to England somewhat in disgrace. And nobody actually knows what became of him. There's a suspicion that he might have drowned back in England. In any event, that's a quick snapshot of the very beginning history of my firm back in the rough old colonial days. Hope you found it enjoyable.